All right, everybody. The 4 agreements. So, tomorrow, or whenever I post next, probably tomorrow, if I can, we'll be on page 39. So, today we're talking about pages 35, 36, 37, 38. So, last time I talked about this part of the story about this girl who was told by her mother that she sings ugly, and the book goes on continuing to say that she develops a complex, and after that fact she doesn't really sing again. And the book kind of points out that the reason things like this happen, such as, the mom coming home with a headache, the girl being happy and singing and dancing or jumping around, the mom telling her to kind of shut up because her voice is ugly, but the voice wasn't really ugly, but she just said that because it was making her headache worse to hear the kid singing because she was already stressed out. And so the reason why the book explains that things like this happen is, people are using what the book calls black magic, and the person who this black magic wording is being used against, such as the daughter, the person is getting, they believe in the opinions of others, and that belief is enough to develop a complex, stop somebody from doing something, keep somebody from doing like what they believe they can do. Just from one instance of somebody saying something, somebody can become shy or insecure. They give another example of a friend who, some reason, one day tells her other friend, oh, that dress you're wearing is ugly, and then it leads that person to maybe never wear that dress again or something. And then it goes into talking about the worst type of black magic, which is gossip. A little bit before that, it talks about, it says like they don't know what they're doing. Like, people who are using this form of words of black magic against other people don't really know what they're doing. They don't know that even one instance of saying something wrong or bad towards someone else can make them, develop a complex. And they also don't really, maybe they know, but they don't have to know. It still kind of works the same either way. Now, I don't really know how this works, if there's an apology afterwards and maybe like an explanation. Of like, look, I was just having a bad day. Not that it's an excuse to be yelling at you or telling you to shut up, but my headache was getting worse. That's why I said your voice is ugly. It's actually, in reality, not ugly. It's beautiful. And I'd actually want you to record me a couple songs. I'd like to have them on a CD to play in my car or something. Like, something encouraging and apologizing might help someone to kind of like challenge that opinion that they now have of themselves because of somebody else's because of someone else. But I don't really know. They don't really talk about that, at least not at the moment. But coming from the field of psychology, I know that there is such thing as work that people can do that's I guess they're called corrective experiences. And so it's like a person can have maybe like abuse in their past, or they don't like a certain type of person. Like, maybe they don't like people who have ever been in the military because their parents were in the military and treated them like crap, and therefore now they don't trust anybody in the military. But then maybe they meet somebody at school and that person's a veteran and they develop a crush and that person's really a safe person to be with, and they have a good relationship and bond, and so they meet one. It only really takes really meeting one person who can set a corrective experience. I mean, when I was working in therapy, there are people who maybe didn't want to work with certain races or certain genders or certain, language backgrounds. Like, some of it, it's like, okay, it makes sense with your comfort levels and preferences and things like that. But there were people who, like, oh, I don't really want to work with this race of people because they don't trust them or whatever, or they feel like they're not understood. So me being a minority, a lot of times it was kind of interesting, because a lot of my clients were like interested to work with me because, most of the people that they were working with were, cis, straight Caucasian women, which is fine, but that's kind of the majority in the field. And when people don't see themselves represented, or they don't see, like, oh, this looks like the people around my neighborhood, or like something like that, a lot of times they might not be interested to really be open with them about stuff. So, I definitely kind of understand how there might be a preference, and I also understand how there might be, a person who feels like, hey, these other people did me wrong, and so anybody in that category I kind of don't really trust because I've never had like a good experience. So that all makes sense to me. Most people don't sit and challenge things like that. Like, if somebody says your dress is ugly or your voice is ugly, they're not going to sit there and challenge it too much and be like, this is one person out of 50 people who have ever complained about my voice. Or, I've been wearing this dress for 2.5 years and my friend never said that it was ugly before. Like, what's up with this person? Or, like, 8 other people complimented me about this dress, like, and this one person says it's ugly, and, I can tell they've been having a bad time lately. So maybe they're saying it for that reason. Like, I'm not making excuses for people saying dumb shit, and I'm not saying I never say dumb shit. I'm just saying, it does happen, unfortunately. But it is something to really be careful about because, our words do have a lot of power. I do recognize myself having, kind of more of like internal opinions about things where it's like, I wonder what of these opinions I got from other people. Like, I remember being in school, in college, in university, and looking around me and being like, there's not really a lot of people that look like me. Now, I was raised in a household where education is definitely priority, and it was very much a value of the family. So I was never told, oh, you can't do this, you can't do that. I was always told, like, yeah, you're gonna probably be a doctor or like get a PhD or an MD or something. Like, nobody ever told me I can't do it. Nobody ever put up barriers in my family in the way that, like, trying to pay for stuff, like, like, maybe, I mean, my folks helped me out a ton, but, like, maybe, like, sometimes, they couldn't really pay for the parking permit on time, or they couldn't really pay for the books on time, or for the classes on time, or whatever the fees were, like, yes, they were paying for a lot of it, not all of it, but a whole lot of it, and even if some of it was late, I didn't have to, like, work a 40-hour work week every week, and on top of trying to carry a full caseload, the course load. Like, I was basically able to spend time studying, and that was my job was to study, and do well and pass my classes. But I do think I did develop a complex for sure in 2 ways. Like, I would say just not seeing a lot of representation. Like when I remember when I grew up, I remember having these thoughts when I grew up that I kind of thought, black people, you know, might not be able to do everything that other people do. Now I didn't really know why I thought that way, but I just thought, as a black person that I was inferior. And the reason why I thought that, I hardly had any black teachers. Anyone who I ever saw who was in a position of power or control or in charge of anything, there were very few black people that I knew that were doing that. Now, it's also because of where I lived, and the way I was socialized. Like, my parents didn't, necessarily raise me around, a black community of people. Like, it was a diverse group of people, but it didn't have, any majority. There was no majority black population. I was definitely often the only black person in the room for most of my life. Even nowadays, still, that's usually the case, unless I go out of my way to go to events like Juneteenth events or Black Pride events or things like that. Or if I'm out with my black friends, then it's okay, I'm around black people. But, I feel like, yeah, that wasn't always the case. With my beliefs, I didn't always understand, I saw, the Cosby Show, and, it's a different world, with, black people going to college and that kind of thing. But I never was able to, visualize as a kid, what my professional life would look like. I was just oh, I hope I pass my classes and do good, but I never really, was too sure how to get to a role of, either having power or having success, or all I knew was get good grades and that'll get you in the door. Get degrees, get good grades, get a lot of experience working, and that'll get your foot in the door. And that is pretty true. But is there discrimination? Yes. I don't even think that job sites sometimes notice that they're discriminating. I've seen it. But I think sometimes they don't really even notice that they are. And sometimes they do. They're just ignorant and uneducated about different types of people. It's changing a little bit, at least, I'm over in Southern California, so of course it's pretty diverse, and it's a diverse but segregated, not formally segregated, but it's pretty racially segregated as far as majority populations in certain areas of the city. Certain areas they're white people, certain areas they're Japanese people, certain areas they're Korean people, certain areas they're Vietnamese people, certain areas they're Latino people. There's just different areas that have different types of people. They're not usually always all combined in the same neighborhoods. Some areas are pretty diverse. I'd say Long Beach is pretty diverse. Parts of downtown, parts of Hollywood. But oftentimes it's very, once you pass this certain major street, all the businesses are in, or a lot of the businesses, the languages, all of a sudden, everything has Chinese writing, or everything has writing in Spanish, or everything's in Vietnamese, or, I'm not complaining about it, it's fine, it's something I love about the city, but it's if you compare, Koreatown to, Monterey Park, or Koreatown to El Sereno area, everything over in El Sereno is pretty much in Spanish, and then everything in Koreatown's pretty much in Korean. And it's not everything. I'd say the majority of businesses are still in English, but you notice it for sure. There's definitely a lot of businesses like that, combined in one area, and that's fine. I think it can be problematic, or it can be, just a good thing. It really just depends how you view it. I can see the costs and benefits of either way. like there's a long list on both sides. But yeah, I definitely was raised um uh in my own mind, I do remember secretly wishing, I used to pray, like not every night, but there was a point in my life when I was a kid, I was young, and I would pray, I would be like, dear God, please make it so I wake up and, my vision is good so I don't have to use glasses, that I have blonde hair and my skin is a little bit lighter. I would pray that, like, I don't know how many years in a row, I prayed that as a child. Like I was young. Like this is like before I could even drive. Um, like I didn't really have pride like in my own like ethnicity too much. And nobody directly was like, you're black, you need to be ashamed, you're black, you need to be like thinking that you're inferior. But I naturally developed that just from being around no one who really looked like me, and the people I was around like never really seemed like, I think I have one friend who was a Caucasian guy who was raised in a black neighborhood. So he was very like, he would seek out black friends. Like cuz they looked like the people in his neighborhood and that's who he wanted to hang out with. And he was like saying how when he was younger, he experienced a lot of racism from being the white kid that was in the black neighborhoods. And I kind of used to like going over to his house because you know he had like neighbors and people in his apartment building that were all black. And so I was like, cool, we can go over there with him and like play basketball with all the other kids. And I was around black people and stuff and it was nice. But um I mean, that's just kind of how it was. And I it's just kind of how things were for me when I was younger. Like I'm definitely different now, but I mean back then, I think a lot of that stuck with me. I think earlier on it was harder for me to do well in school because I just kind of thought like, okay, like if I get maybe not so great of grades, that's fine, because I don't see anyone else that looks like me that's getting good grades. Like I would see, all I really saw on TV, like back then anyways, was like, hip hop and all that kind of videos and stuff. And most of those people, like in the videos, they didn't seem to be promoting wealth. They seemed to be like in poverty and all these other things. And when I saw movies with black people, Spike Lee or whatever, like Crooklyn, and movies about black people, a lot of times the people were, in poverty or involved in crimes and just having a hard time of it, other than like things like the Cosby Show and all that kind of stuff, and those were rare. Like I would see that and I would be like, this isn't, like, it was like, I'm not saying that they weren't black enough, that's not what I'm saying, but I felt like they were some other representation that to me felt a little like, okay, this is maybe a version, but this isn't like, it seemed like an extreme version on the other end. Like it seemed like, so I was getting kind of the message that, that on one end, there was no representation of any successful black people in my life other than family members that I was like, they must be rare. And I saw how hard they worked, and I was like, I don't know if I want to do that. Like, never being home with your family and always being stressed out. And I'm like, well, that just means black people have to work so much harder if they want to be successful. They have to work so hard that they're just, like, unhappy. And I just didn't understand it. I was like, I looked around me and I saw people with their parents and going on all these trips and vacations and, like, all these kinds of things. And I was like, well, why do my parents work so damn hard and I hardly ever see them? And like, maybe we had even a nicer place and lived in a nicer neighborhood than the majority of people I knew. But even though the other people weren't black people, like we lived kind of like in a more upscale type of area. Maybe on the surface it looked like we had more wealth than a lot of people I knew. But then when it came to stuff like class trips or certain stuff, I was like, well, my folks can't really afford this. Or, there was always stuff where like they couldn't afford this or couldn't afford that. So I was like, I kind of felt like there was that like keeping up with the Joneses, and then seeing them working all the time and working so hard. I was like, this doesn't seem sustainable for like good health and stuff, and like for happiness. And I was thinking about my future, and I'm like, yeah, if I ever had kids, I don't know if I could raise kids and be working like this, working so hard and never having a break, But that was just kind of how my parents' work ethic was, and I think it helped everyone to get where they were. But at the same time, it's hard. Like, kids are smart. They observe what's around them. I was a smart kid, I observed what was around me. I kind of understood that, hey, there's a lot of stuff kind of like around, and I'm trying to do what's around me. I'm trying to kind of have a good time. And so, yeah, I didn't really, like, I don't think I fully understood kind of what I needed, what, like kind of why I was thinking the way that I was. I don't think I really understood it, but looking back, I'm like, yeah, it kind of makes sense, because, how I was raised, where I was raised. It makes sense that I would have some like weird understanding of things. But I do think later on, when it came to like I don't know, there were some points in my life, like maybe like early in high school, where I struggled with getting good grades. Like, I think I didn't really learn how to actually like do really good with studying until I was maybe around like 7th or 8th grade or so. And then like in 9th or 10th grade, I remember feeling some kind of pressure, because I was like, well, I don't know if I'm like being like a good black person. Like, I didn't really know. I was just kind of like, well, I don't know if I'm supposed to try too hard, or if I'm supposed to get really good grades, or like there was some stuff like that came up that I was like, I don't know, like just mostly because I didn't see anybody around me doing anything that looked like what my parents would tell me. Like, they'd be like, like it was just like basic stuff of how to get ahead in life with like education, and it helped. It was good. I mean, I applied it and got pretty far, and I also had, the resources that my parents provided for me, and that helped. And, it was fine. But, I start to think about it, and I'm like, man, like it's maybe not, like the easiest of choices to make. So I don't know. So yeah, just, and then when it comes to gossip, like, definitely that's always been one of the main things that rubs me wrong in social circles, is that it creates such an unsafe space. And I grew up in an environment where I would mention that, not exactly in those words, but I was just like, dude, don't you guys see that, like, this gossip is out of control? And nobody else seemed to want to confront it but me. And nobody else was trying to be disciplined about that. And it was a turnoff for me, especially with like religion and stuff. It was a turnoff for me, because I was like, of all the stuff that they preach about every single week and every single time you're with people, it's like they'd rather talk about all the prejudices and all this other political stuff versus talking about actual stuff that matters for people's mental health, Like, they would just ignore it, and I saw that, and I was like, this is stupid. Like, why would I ever, be a part of people who can't even, like, see that this is wrong? It's like they were so focused on all these other stupid things that they didn't want people to do that weren't harming really anybody. It's like, if I drink a cup of coffee, how is that gonna bother you? If I listen to music with drums or dance around in my room, how is that gonna like really hurt somebody? Versus if I start talking crap about them or like spreading rumors about like their secrets and things, that's definitely gonna hurt them. And so, but I could do that. I could spread rumors about their secrets and be okay. But if somebody heard that I bought, a cheeseburger with bacon on the Sabbath, it's like, God forbid, so it's like things like that are like, none of these other things are even anybody's business, like, who cares, like, what I'm eating or what I do on the Sabbath and all these other things. It's like, none of that really matters, right? Like, none of that's really gonna affect any other person, but if anybody, it might affect me, but it's not gonna affect anybody else in a church building. So why are they talking about it so much? Like, to me, I was like, this doesn't make any sense. This is stupid. But yeah, that was one thing that I noticed, with the gossiping. It just really got out of control. But, let me see. That might be about all I have to say about those topics in particular, but, I don't really know. Like, it's not like I don't know. Like, it is kind of what it is. But yeah, so I'm gonna, start heading to the gym. And for this episode, that's about it for now. And so with that, thank you so much for listening.